Sethget?
No, Hegseth.
Sethget.
Okay.
Get
So
Seth.
there's news of like Hegseth mail.ru email address, and it's like part of Have I Been Pwned. I
Who
haven't been
hasn't
able to
had
catch
a
up this morning.
mail.ru email address in their lifetime? Yeah?
This morning, I tell you honestly, I was thinking I need to delete all my Mail.ru addresses because, like, sometimes in the future they'll probably put you in jail if you have one of those.
I don't. It's like a nice bit of free storage.
Hello, gentlemen. Good morning. It is episode 40 of the Three Body Problem. I'm here with Costin, Ryu, and Juanito, checking in from Washington, D.C. and Bucharest, Romania, on a day when everyone is still sharing memes. The memes have been glorious. On Signalgate, which is this Jeffrey Goldberg being inadvertently, accidentally added to a group chat where some of the most powerful people in the world were like, planning a military operation in Yemen. There's all kinds of obvious security implications, national security implications, intelligence implications, and so on. Why is this such a big story in our circles, Costin? And is there anything left over to talk about that we haven't already discussed in all our group chats?
In all of our PC small groups?
Oh my gosh, my entire Signal page became this PC small group thing. What stood out to you the most, Costin, after you'd read this thing?
I mean, look, I read the stories and I was like just putting myself in that position. I think we discussed this, guys, that it feels a bit wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm not the right person to ask that question. But I was thinking that if somebody added me in a group, in a Signal, WhatsApp, whatever group, by accident, I would say something. And I put a poll on Twitter X where 67% of the people said that they would just sit there and collect all the data. And I was just wondering to myself, since I voted in my own poll, that I would just warn them, hey, am I supposed to be in this Houthi PC small group? Like, I know I'm like knowledgeable of things, but like, am I in the right place?
All right,
Yeah.
let me wait. Juanito, before you go, let me ask him a direct question then. So you're sitting in your Signal and nothing is happening. You're hanging out on a Saturday,
Nothing
and
is
suddenly Adam Myers from CrowdStrike add you to a group chat with like the top 10 CrowdStrike people doing security research. And guess what this group chat is? Like just specialized Yara rules for specialized things. Your life is made up of like collection of Yara rules. You want to tell me you're going to notify Adam immediately? Be honest. You get, and I bring this up because, like, if you're a journalist covering national security, the national security apparatus add you to a group chat, what are you supposed to do? So tell me, Costa, you're gonna jump out of the CrowdStrike chat?
Yeah, look, that's like, everybody has a price. And my price is in Yara rules. So I can say that, yes, there's a point where it does make sense to stay a bit longer, but it doesn't change the fact that I feel guilty, and I would feel guilty. So maybe it's my nature, I don't know. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot of lessons here. Well, first of all, it's not the first time it happens, and it will not be the last time that somebody gets added by mistake to a group, to a forum, to a chat, to an email thread in CC, in BCC. I mean, I saw cases like that before many times, and they'll happen again. Now, with Signal, what I can say it's interesting in this story is that all these guys, they're actually using Signal. So to me, that's interesting. In the sense that they, with their knowledge, with their connections, they trust Signal enough to discuss these kind of sensitive things. So for me, that's good. Unless, of course, it's some kind of conspiracy theories. And we were joking that, if you have some kind of SIGINT capability against Signal and you want more people to use it, what is the best way? It's do something like this and everybody will be using Signal in no time, which is actually what's happening right now. of course, just the conspiracy Ryan theory there.
Is there something to like the use of initials on Signal that isn't quite connected to your a contact in your list? You can kind of be added by a username. Help me understand what was like the little hiccup
The failure,
there.
the opsec fail, huh?
Yeah, what was the opsec failure here?
That's a good question. I see a lot of people, they do use initials. Me personally, I don't like that because I don't know who that is. Like, who is, I don't know, CU? Who's that? I have no idea.
My
And
internet
there's-
is crapping out, and I'm sad to be missing portions of this discussion. But like, I'm dude, Kostin, the initials thing is driving me fucking insane. It
All
was
right.
fine. It was fine when you had them tied to your phone number, right? Like at that point, there was some sort of like source of truth. I'm not even sure I really blame these dudes for like fucking this one up. Like I think ever since we switched to the username thing. And worse yet, you can't even see the username.
I think that's like
It
the
drives me
biggest issue here.
insane.
That's a technical deficiency, though. Like that's
I think
like
I
you
think
should
it's a
have some
real
sort of visual.
fail. I think it's
I
a
don't know if
real
it's a
fail on the part
deficiency.
of Signal. Like, what is your ground truth? Like, they
Mm-hmm.
treat it like key verification is somehow a valid thing. Like, what am I comparing that to?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
with a phone
yeah.
number, I know it's yours.
Mm.
And if we are going to remove phone numbers, then you have a unique username. Okay, then I know that's your username, but I can't see your username. So it's like, what the fuck am I actually holding as ground truth? Like, I'm not trying to give these guys a pass, but like, I would have made that mistake. I could have done exactly what happened here.
Right, but the point Kostin made right before, maybe while you popped off, was
Yeah, my
like
bad,
these
sorry.
guys, even with all the information they have at the highest level, have come to the conclusion that Signal is a safe and secure and useful way. Now that doesn't take this issue into consideration. The fact that all these initials and usernames and it's not tied to a phone number and so on, like that in itself should be flagged as like a reason why this is not.
Well,
I don't know.
but dude, are they using this because it's like they've judged it to be a secure thing?
Or is it just a convenience thing?
Well, A, it's a convenience thing. B, like there is no way that this is like a legally sanctioned communications mechanism, because like the whole point is like there are laws about disclosure and oversight. Like you can't use a disappearing messages chat that is not being in any way logged, in any way backed up. Like you literally, it makes it impossible for you to like, what's the record of this bombing run? When history 40 years from now declassifies whatever, there is no record of like the decision making that happened, who said what. Like, what if we found out tomorrow that the president hadn't actually approved this airstrike and that it was like these random 10 people in the White House got confused? You can't go to any
disagree
source of
with you here.
truth.
Look, I don't think that any of this happens without, like you say, a true chain of command and logged permissions and approvals. What I think the group was, it was more like chit chat around that kind of decisions. I don't think that they were actually making those decisions there. And the other thing is, by the way, how is it different from people meeting face to face and saying, hey, we want to do that? The other guy says, yeah, sure, sounds like a good idea, let's do it. And there's no record of
There is
that
a record of the
conversations.
meetings. There's a record of the
What
meetings, any
if
written
they meet in a
materials.
coffee shop? What if
They
they meet out on
don't.
the street?
Like, this
They
is
don't?
classified material. You're not supposed to discuss it in a like I'm not saying that it's
How-
unreasonable by normal people standards. I'm saying that it's illegal by US government standards. Like
Listen to Mr. America and his norms and good governance.
I don't give a fuck. I'm not. I'm like, nobody gives a shit about the law anymore, and like I'm not gonna be the person who's gonna enforce it for them. I'm just saying that as far as like how this shit is supposed to work, and they said it, like the Atlantic Council piece said it. It's like, guys, like there are laws and rules around this about like presidential disclosure. The executive has to be able to substantiate this is how decisions were made. This is who knew about whatever. Like if there had been a leak that wasn't the whole group chat, but rather somebody in that chat had disclosed this to a friend of theirs who told it to a European whatever, and it made its way out to the public, how do you investigate who knew, when they knew, what they knew, because this is all being done in like a WhatsApp chat or whatever. Like everything's just being shredded. There are elements of this where like it's obvious that these folks are just doing what they think is best, and I don't think there's anybody in the middle of this saying, guys, like, what the fuck? Like this, how does this follow any procedure, right?
What are the chances, like Conspiracy Ryan pops in, what are the chances one of those iPhones or devices that are being used there is compromised by a nation state? And I ask this because we talk about Signal in the sense that it's a secure messenger. It's just the traffic is secure in transit, like on device. If an adversary is sitting on device anywhere, that this communication is compromised anyway. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 15 people were in the chat? What are the chances one of those is being monitored?
They're all iPhones. I mean, maybe they're like secure phones.
Running Android? It's not
Graphene OS with APKs from Signal.
Secure phones running Signal? Like, it would have to be like a modified version of Signal. Like,
right.
I just...
They would have said that already.
Well, look
I
at
guarantee you there's a half dozen iPhones in there.
You remember all the bullshit around Obama's BlackBerry? Like, when they gave him a BlackBerry, it was like the NSA had, like, built a fucking BlackBerry, right? Like it was specifically hardened for
still,
him.
he was using his iPhone, right?
I mean, there were some arguments about that, yeah.
And then they said like we built like a specialized secure version, iPhone version
BlackBerry.
for Obama. No, because he didn't like the BlackBerry, so he ended up with a BlackBerry in one hand and the iPhone in the other hand, and an Android in the third hand. But like. I think, well, speaking for, again, I understand all that legal, and to be honest, that's the reason why we don't have the IOX for Salt Typhoon, like all this legal bullshit, right? And when I saw these guys, like, you know, people at the top of the world using Signal, like the plebs, like us, like everybody else,
they're just like us,
and like emojis, you know, American flag, fist bump. They're like normal people, right? They're chatting on Signal.
Cousin, you're having a quintessentially American experience right now. What you're saying is that you would have a beer with one of these guys. And that's one of like the things that determines who gets to be president here. You know, do they have a penis? Are they white enough? Do you trust them to have a beer? Yeah, okay, now like give them the nuclear football. It's a quintessential American elections thing to be like, oh, I just, you know, like Hillary just doesn't seem like somebody I want to sit down and have a beer with. And you're like, who the fuck cares, bro? Like, why is that Signal? The metric? I don't know, man. I don't know. Her emails, bro.
But like, look, we all worked in some company where they force you to use Teams or something of the likes.
I would never work at a fucking company.
Everybody's like using Signal and what was it, Wire, and before Wire was like the red thingy. Wicker. Exactly.
Whatever happened to Threema?
Threema was niche, man. It was because it was like only on iOS, right? So you could never integrate into.
No.
Like I'm saying, like you couldn't have multiple devices. Like you couldn't have desktop. You couldn't have like the same Wicker key on multiple. Like, which was a good security measure. It's just
like every single person in that chat has a government issued mobile device,
which is probably useless, right?
I mean, Marco Antonio Rubio adding himself as MAR adds MAR. Say again.
I said it's probably useless because it has no emojis.
That's my point.
Fist bump, American flag, fire.
This is more of a convenience. Let's just circumvent policy. This is his best, and we all do. I think this is what Costin is saying. Like you go work for a company and they say this is all our official tools.
Like Shadow. Look, everyone gets onto Shadow infrastructure, but the director of the CIA probably should not be using fucking Shadow IT infra to coordinate a fucking strike. They're literally, dude, I don't know if you've ever heard like someone from like a director of the CIA or literally anybody talk about live ops, but the idea of like, oh, no worries, we'll get the dudes that are sitting in the house next to him to let us know is like insane levels of opsec fail, like insane levels of like transparency as far as like the CIA is concerned.
He testified before Congress that on the first day in the office, they set this Signal up on his desktop computer at the office implying that this is standard operating procedure, right?
I'm sorry, guys. I don't look. I don't know, but I really, really, really don't think so. That's all I'm saying. It just does not sound right to me.
One other thing that's getting lumped in
who
here
the fuck
is
am I to question these folks? I'm just saying it. From my lowly point in the world, it just doesn't sound right.
We actually got a statement from Signal in response to this, and I think they were trying to clarify this notion of like, yes, the government just issued a warning about Signal quote unquote vulnerabilities, but that was just that QR code, Russians using QR code to link to do this linked devices thing. People are kind of confusing the two. It's like, yeah, there's like a whole bunch of Signal security problems over here when they're two totally unrelated things. Do you think this stops the use of Signal for like government stuff? Do you think in post-mortem to this they've issued orders that no more Signal, or do you think like, dude, this Signal and WhatsApp is just how government runs?
That was
the
never
entire court
how...
system is running on WhatsApp.
Look, let's move off this topic, but I'm just because I'm saying like, because it's not a change as in like, oh, they're not going to be allowed to do this anymore. At this level with classified material, there is no way in hell that this was how this was supposed to be run. Like, these people, the amount of infrastructure and like accommodations that are made for folks at this level to have access to SCIFs, to have access to secure environments,
even on the road, like if you're in a hotel room, they have the ability. Yeah.
Like, they have all this shit that gets set up for these people to speak securely. There is no way on earth that this was meant to be discussed in Signal. Like, I don't think the US government has just kind of like been like, yo, Signal's so cool that we're just gonna like take our super secure hardware, phone lines, and environment and then move it through a commercial application with its own servers, right? Like, it just doesn't compute. It does not make any fucking sense. Like, there's no way in hell. What the fuck? Like, it's just... No, they were not allowed to do it before. They're not allowed to do it now. They just don't give a shit, and that's fine, right? Like, that's up to them at this point.
Before we move off this topic, I asked a question and neither of you answered, and I'll just kind of bring it back up again with a shout out to Heather Atkins, VP of Security over at Google, saying it's a quick reminder that the top tier nation states have iOS and Android O-days. The conversation kind of veered off that we weren't sure if it was Android or iPhone. And the argument here is Signal may be end-to-end encrypted, but a motivated adversary with a big budget and a pool of talented hackers can likely remotely own your device and see all your secret squirrel messages. If you're an advanced nation state spy agency, the names in that group chat are your targets for
like
this stuff,
right? Like the top of your entire fucking list. Like, literally, if those dudes are not at the top of your list, either the US is not a collection target for you at all, or you are terrible at your fucking job. Like, there is no one who could have greater certainty on this fucking planet that they're on the top list of adversaries, of collection targets. Like, it's just, that's the part that's like baffling to me, where I'm just kind of sitting here being more like, look, this isn't an OPSEC. OPSEC is not a factor in these conversations at all. Because there is no model there's no threat modeling or OPSEC mechanism on Earth for the US government where this is like how you're meant to do this. Like, there's just no way. And like, we don't even have to get creative. Some of these people were on the Salt Typhoon list as far as we know, at least JD Vance, right? Like, we don't even have to get further out of like, we don't have to speculate. It's
documented, yeah. Costin, anything else to this story?
I was just saying last week was probably the week when the US government realized what bring your own device means, and like all the challenges that come from bring your own device to work. That's a reality. Sorry. You remember all those CISA advisories about bringing your own device?
Juanito, Mr. America, why are we putting up with these freeloading Europeans, these pathetic freeloading Europeans?
These fucking freeloading Europeans.
Why aren't you doing more to protect the Suez Canal?
It's okay.
Anyway,
We're gonna extract some value from it. I mean, look,
that part of the discussion was fascinating in itself.
that was actually the interesting part, right? Because you see how, like, I think there's a lot of conversations where folks, especially folks who are not in line with this administration, at some point, well, actually, folks who are in line with this administration, there is this notion that there's the bluster, there's the public messaging, the thing you say on television, and then there's what these people think in private, right? And like, surely there's like a distinction between the persona you put on Fox News and the person you are when you're talking about taking military strikes, right? Like, there is this idea. And I think moments like this behind the curtain actually show that, like, nah, dog, like, it looks exactly the way it's written on the tin. Like, nobody was acting out of character in that situation. You're like, these dudes are exactly the dudes they told you they were. And that's why I'm also not getting bent out of shape about the Signal shit. Nobody walked in there going like, oh yeah, we are the doing things by the book party, right? Like, that shit went out the window long ago. So I agree with you, Ryan. Like, to me, everyone's focusing on the wrong side of this, or at least, like, we're in cyber, so we're focused on like the opsec of it all. But to me, the fascinating part was like, this is how decisions are being made back there. These are how people represent themselves, and they really do mean what they're saying about Europe and the rest of what it means to project hard and soft power and power politics in the rest of the world. I think, like, the most transparent version of all of this would have been to call NATO command and basically say, we're the only ones who are going to unblock these things. It matters more to you than to us. How much are we going to get for it? Like, that's the only part that was missing, was literally like, look, here's a catalog of options. You want us to bomb the Houthis? 45 million. You want us to, like, or like 450 million in trade concessions.
Where's the sales kit?
You want us to, like, fix Gaza? Well, that's $1.5 billion. You want us to protect Saudi oil fields? $35 billion. Right? Like, that's the only thing that's missing, is literally the US.
But it was there at the end of the chat.
It was in the background. It was like, it wasn't even implied. It was explicit, but it didn't have a number on it. All I'm saying is, what we're missing is the, like, fast food menu option of, like, to the highest bidder, if you would like us to back the Russians off of Ukraine, like $45 billion, right? Like, it's just, that's the only part. But, like, dude, these dudes are telling you what their priorities are. And I honestly, I'm not even, like, yelling at any of you or any Americans. Like, the Europeans are waking up, like, European governments are waking up, but it's been surprisingly slow. They've been surprisingly groggy in catching up to, like, yo, this shit just got real. It got really, really real. And it's real on the simplest terms possible. You want us to do something that benefits you? Put up some fucking money. And, like, I agree with them in being a little, like, pearl clutching, like, but that's just the way it works now. So, like, how are you gonna negotiate with these folks? Like, how do you want the established order to continue to function the way you liked it? Okay, how would you try to pay for that? Because that seems to be what it all boils down to now.
Defend yourself, Mr. Romania.
No, look, I was thinking that what's missing from these discussions is like a signal group for US and Europe, a signal group for US and Canada. I generally think that signal groups and people talking more, like, in an informal manner, would fix a lot of things. But yeah, I can understand why everything went to hell and why we're now, like, doing all this post-mortem analysis of powerful people relying on Signal to make important decisions. But I don't know, like, I can say that there was some good outcome from this story, which is in a way that I think that when you create, and like the fundamental question is why they were using Signal in the first place. And I think that they were unhappy with whatever solutions they have for all sorts of reasons, including, like you said, that all the conversations are probably logged. And that tells me that nobody likes being spied upon, and nobody likes their conversations being logged. And that probably should teach people some kind of lessons. And the other thing is that, come on, I'm sure that the NSA can produce a secure phone running some custom version of Android with either their own, I don't know, fork of Signal or whatever else that these people could be using.
But Kostin, this is clearly not that, because if they had done that, they should not have been able to add someone who's living in civilian Signal, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
that's my whole point, right? Like there's nothing to say that they could not take the Signal protocol, the Signal app, put it in a secure phone, make it run through their own version of infrastructure. Though frankly, if you're already developing that, like you don't really need Signal, but fine. Like you could, if like you're like, yo, these boomers like really like using things they're familiar with. We're gonna make it all look like the stuff that they think it is, but like we're gonna make it in our own infrastructure, so on and so forth. Like then I could see that. But that would make this situation impossible because journalists are not getting NSA phones connected to NSA Signal infrastructure. So
Fair
like by
enough.
definition, this is just not what we're seeing here. And like I think that, look, it's really obvious that this administration is not overly concerned with like regulatory stuff or even just like by the book governance stuff. But like I think at the end of the day, if these folks are gonna have a hard time in the courts, like in the aftermath of this administration, it's gonna be over really dumb shit like this. It's like some citizen watchdog suing, basically saying, "Hey, where are the logs and like the presidential records about discussions that had to do with the Houthi whatever?" And they already know that when they sue, no one's going to be able to produce these conversations because they're happening on normal phones, in normal Signal, in disappearing group chats. Like it just, you know.
Unless somebody had iCloud backup enabled for Signal.
And they just asked they asked
No,
the
it
UK.
doesn't keep it. It
They asked the
doesn't
British.
keep that stuff.
Aye.
It
All
doesn't
right,
keep it. You have to pass the database from one phone to another in like a sync.
Let me close the loop on this very quickly. The initials thing isn't going away, right? When you're adding people to a group and there's this initials thing, there's always that moment of uncertainty that still remains. I'm trying to get the listeners to understand like some of the risks they're absorbing when they're using Signal for private sensitive communications. In fact, for all private sensitive communications, what do we default to? A Signal chat, right? Over everything else. So I mean, this has nothing to do. This story doesn't necessarily move any of us off of Signal, but it's important to understand some of the little hiccups that happen along the way. Is this something for Signal to fix?
I hope that they don't ban Signal over this story in the government and replace it with some other shitty alternative.
Unlikely.
I don't know. X groups or something like chatting on X direct messages instead of Signal.
I'm just glad we didn't see like a Grok AI thing like pop up in the middle of this. It looks like you're trying to bomb the Houthis, right?
This is what we asked for though, right? Because when Signal was tied to phone numbers, that was a security opsec problem. Now they untied it and here we go with like a mistake problem.
But that's not the issue. Well, if I may, like the issue in my opinion is like even when someone sends you a message, like let's say whoever has your phone number or your Signal username, they send you a message, you don't see their username, and you don't see their phone number, you don't see anything about them.
Signal fucked up here. Like
I think so.
I think Signal fucked up.
So what needs to be fixed?
Well, so we've been trying to flag this, but like I don't know. It's not like I made it my mission to like flag this, but it is genuinely extremely annoying. I think it's a serious failure on the part of Signal's UX mechanism, which is it's
in the protocol actually.
They seem to think that they're going for a way for people to be so secure that they can communicate with complete ephemerality of identity, where you go, I'm this username today, and tomorrow I change my username, and like, peace out, I'm out. Like, and that seems to be like a desirable standard, and I disagree with that because, frankly, what you are doing is creating, like, somehow you have managed to make real the identity problem in cryptography. Most of the time, the identity problem in cryptography, where you go, well, if we have perfectly secure communications between Bob and Alice, but how would Bob know that he's talking to Alice? And you're like, well, he would ask her a question and Alice would be able to like kind of verify that it's her. Like, this is a dumb problem. And it wasn't it was kind of a dumb problem until Signal did this, where they're like, Alice can rename herself whatever the fuck she wants. We're also going to remove the unique identifier that you used to have that used to tie Alice, her phone number. We're going to give her a new unique identifier that she can change whenever she wants. And even though you guys are talking to each other, I'm not going to tell you what her unique identifier is. That's where they fucked
Someone was
up.
asking for that though. Why was that a feature request?
I'm
Is there an OPSEC
assuming
security thing that we're not paying attention to?
there is. I think that there is an OPSEC. There is a version of OPSEC where this is desirable, which is to be able to create unique accounts that somehow can be disposable in a way, like, if that makes any sense. Like, I can have a unique username, you and I can communicate, there's a perfect key exchange happening there, then tomorrow I decide I'm no longer this username, I'm someone else, and like,
Truly
there's this kind of
disappearing.
like ephemerality to the inboundness of it all. But I just cannot see that as a desirable thing when I'm weighing that in contrast to being able to tell who the fuck I'm talking to from like a casual perspective. I have so many people who are named V or D or K and like Alex, and there's 7 Alexes, and I'm just fucking, and like the worst part is like some of them don't have any profile pictures. You're just like, well,
Or phone number that attached
and now
to
there's
them.
no phone number and there's no username. Like,
This is real. This is a real pain.
I respect that there's some brilliant people working on crypto stuff at Signal. I just think as a user and from a threat modeling perspective, I think they're going about solving a problem, a small problem, and in doing so, they're creating a really, really big problem. And
Stop
I just
using
think,
your initials in Signal too. Like all these people using their initials
I
in
mean,
these
I
one
can't
letters.
judge them, right? I can't say anything, right? Like,
Your entire name is an initial.
my whole thing, but I think it's relatively unique. But
It's something like costing G, okay?
Maybe.
Maybe.
sure, but
Maybe.
you,
What's
but
the
to
G
most
for
people,
again?
you're not G, you're Coastin R, right? Like, you know,
Eh,
so wrong Coastin, different, it's different.
So this is something you would ask for a fix for. I mean, this is a pain point, a real pain
I've
point.
been asking for a fix for it because the other part of this is I never realized how many people's phone numbers I only had because of Signal. And the minute they unilaterally made this change, my contact book like fucking vanished. I was just like, so
It's true.
I needed to have been saving all these phone numbers to my device where they are subject to being backed up and scooped in other ways and being extracted from my phone for other apps that want to do contact chaining. Like, it actually created a series of like it's a brilliant, I'm sure it's a brilliant cryptographic coup, but from a threat modeling and actual OPSEC standpoint, it has created really big problems. And I wish they would roll it back. Like, I wish, like, you can keep usernames, but I need to be able to see the username. And if you change it and you haven't revoked whatever communications you were having or whatever it is, I should be able to see what your new username is. I should get a notification that you changed your username. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to keep track of anyone's identities on? I'll put it this way. I can go right now into the group chat and change my name to your name, change my profile picture to your profile picture, and no one can fucking tell us apart at all.
This is true.
What the fuck? Like, there's no way that this is. I'm gonna do it right now. Like,
I'm gonna do it right now
That's right.
myself.
We're all gonna
Let's do
switch.
it.
We're all fuck these
Ryan
people.
Ray.
Everybody's Ryan.
I'll do
I'm
Kostin.
gonna
I'm
be
gonna be
Ryan
Kostin
Ray.
Ryu.
No, be Ryan.
Oh, we all be Ryan. What does Ryan's look like? Because I have his number saved. So like, oh, it's Ryan Narain one. Yeah, got it. I got this.
Let's do
Let me
it.
pick up that the picture with the dog. Beautiful picture. Beautiful.
It's a real problematic issue. I mean, we're all running into it. Is there anything to do while you guys goof around on Signal? What's the
You have
last
an
Only
idea?
closing
Signal
thoughts?
can fix this.
How about like $7 per month verified badge on Signal?
Ah.
No,
Like
unless it
a
gives you
little
something unique.
blue circle.
But if it doesn't give you a unique identifier, then it's just a fucking sticker.
You get like the verified badge, you know, it means that it's you, whatever. And when you talk
Super
to
Like the one on
someone, they
X.
can see your like verified identity.
but
Yeah.
verified to what? That's my
Same
point.
as
It's just
same
like,
as X,
I
same as
thought
Twitter.
Signal was
X.
supposed to
no,
be
because
anonymous.
X is connected to a unique identifier, which is your handle.
Mhm. Agree.
That the
agree.
problem in Signal is not that people can't have things that look like you. So sorry, Twitter doesn't have, or X doesn't have this problem at all, because I can go and change my name and I can change my picture to look like
Mhm.
Ryan, but I cannot spoof his handle. There is a connection of his unique handle as his
Mhm.
account. So I can make my shit look like it, but I can't suddenly be like ghost as at Ryan Narain also, right? Like that's what's missing in Signal. You can disconnect things from phone numbers and connect them to usernames, but you need to tell people what the fucking username is. Like it just, I don't get it, man. It's even hard to share. I can't share a contact. I can't share contacts anymore. Like this, it just, what the
Use
fuck is,
iMessages.
what the
Use
fuck is
iMessage for that.
happening, man? Sorry.
All right, Signal folks, get online.
Please, I am Ryan Narain now.
I can't believe we did 35 minutes of this Signalgate story,
Me
but here we
neither,
are.
honestly.
Let's move on.
Sorry.
I want to move on quickly because there's a couple of things I want to get to before we got to run. And the top of the list here, Costin, is your old team flagged some, advertised some torpedoes armed, which is kind of like our cue that we were getting a big APT report. And then we saw Operation ForumTroll out of Kaspersky that flagged a 0-day in the Google Chrome sandbox O-day that Google fixed. There's one single IOC in the report, and there's nothing. Very strange report. It's missing a lot. What do you make of this Operation ForumTroll?
Yeah, that's an interesting report about Chrome 0-day. Probably there's actually 2 0 days involved here that they're actually talking about, but unfortunately there are not that many details. There's a domain that they shared, the primakov readings.info, which unfortunately doesn't give a lot of information you can pivot on or other things that you can find. There's like some JavaScript that used to be available on that website and the framework, but not a lot of information. So I guess there's a kind of timed release here, dropping parts of this research.
Where did you get 2 0 days from? Hold on a second. There's one that patched, and then there's a remote code execution issue that they could not recapture.
Correct. So
But
I think
it doesn't
that
have to
one
be
is,
O-Day though. It could it be somebody running something unpatched?
You think it's not O-Day, bro? You think it was one O-Day and then the other thing's just like whatever?
And the fact, yeah, they didn't catch that one. But I mean, looking at previous chains similar to this one, there's typically another 0-day or an EOP or escape sandbox.
And that's usually on the Windows side, right?
Correct. So I would say probably there's another one involved that maybe they'll catch in the future. I don't know. I would assume that they deployed hundreds of signatures for anything that may look similar. Like, I mean, based on our previous experience, when we discovered one of these 0 days, we would write a bunch of silents that try to catch anything similar, hunting back in time, but also from that moment on to see if there's any other exploitation going on. To be honest, these remind me maybe a bit of PuzzleMaker. There's unfortunately there's no attribution in the blog. There's nothing. At
Hold
the
on a
same
second.
time,
You can't go so fast. We got to pause a little bit.
let me say one other thing, which was that Boris Larin actually filmed a video of about 1 minute in which he is walking through the office, and he is talking about the fact that if you want to read more and who is behind this attack, go to SecureList. But unfortunately, on SecureList, it doesn't say who is behind the attack. So I guess that there's other things coming, like maybe more on attribution. I don't know. But this is what it reminded me on, to be honest, of which is PuzzleMaker.
The end of the Kaspersky blog ends by saying, we plan to publish a detailed report with technical details about the zero-day exploit, the sophisticated malware, and the attacker's techniques. So this initial thing is incomplete. I mean, just based on the level of what we usually get. This is incomplete from that perspective. Now, pause for a second. Who or what is this PuzzleMaker? I just Googled it for a second and I saw it on your mysterious APT list, like the top 10 mysterious APTs. And there was PuzzleMaker with no attribution. So you can't just drop that there. You got to tell me who the hell is this PuzzleMaker?
Well, I can't say more
because
than
the
what
victims
is...
here are all Russians, right? Russian
yeah.
organization. So this is Kaspersky outing an APT, a sophisticated APT of an adversary that's targeting Russian organizations.
That is
Sounds
very
good.
smart. That is very smart, and like has access to some pretty high-end, interesting exploits, right? Even
Correct.
that alone, I look at the attribution, I'm like, historically interesting.
Kostin, give me, tell me.
Like, it's on the big mysteries list for a reason, I guess, and since it's on the list, it means we don't know who was behind it, unless, of course,
or we did not know
Juan
when
wants
that
to
was
say more.
published.
I don't know, man. That's not my finding to share, right?
I would say that yeah.
Is it a NATO country?
I wouldn't know. I don't know. I mean, there were
Are they a NATO
no
country?
clues. Who?
This
Who are you
puzzle,
thinking
whoever's
of?
behind this PuzzleMaker. Why are you guys being this like
Hush,
ippy
hush.
ippy with me? Yes. The audience demands to know what we know about things. If we don't know, we don't know. It feels like you guys know and you don't want to say. And if that's fair too, but just like tell us you don't want to say.
I don't know. I'm as confused as you, but it seems that maybe some of us know more. I'm sure there'll be a speech at a conference sometimes, or the fact that there will never be any speech about that at any conference is a maybe better indicator.
I don't know.
teller
Okay,
here.
so KL is, I was very excited because I saw the like torpedoes armed messages, which always preface interesting
Something
things,
big. Yeah,
right?
it's useful.
Like,
They save it for good
if
things.
it's not,
Yeah.
if it's not big, you're almost like, what the fuck, guys? Like you're
Stop with it,
misusing you're misusing the flag. And in this case, it's not that I think that it was deflating. It was more like it almost seemed like they were going to give us something big, and then they pulled back at the 11th hour. And like just the time of the publication to me is like, this isn't normal, right? So I'm guessing
Right,
things
came
like,
late in the
I'm not in touch with
afternoon.
them, but it to me, I'm like, it kind of feels like there was some friction along the way. And it's really unusual to get a blog post that says, look at our O days, we'll give you the report on the threat actor soon. It's like, maybe if it's a PR strategy, it's kind of like a little, deflating, right? Like you're teasing something and it's not, I don't know, but who knows, right? Like maybe it's that complicated a research and they were that rushed with the O day, and who knows, but I don't know. I want to see what this ForumTroll is, because they didn't say it was PuzzleMaker, right? Like, is it a campaign under
No,
PuzzleMaker?
Kostin just brought that up, but that's why I was asking, like, why would you flag it? Two things. Why was PuzzleMaker on your top 10 most mysterious APT list? Like, what made it mysterious? Is it just the missing attribution piece? And why did this remind you of that? Is it just the exploitation, the OD exploitation with the RCE and the backend? Like, help me understand why you flagged that.
Yeah, I guess this kind of, let's say, of targeting against Russia through zero, well, not in this case 0 day, but not 0 click, but URLs or links that you need to click, so one-click chains if you want.
Drive-bys, right? Yeah.
It doesn't happen a lot. I mean, the super sophisticated threat actors out there, they're like completely silent. There's no clicking involved. It's either some kind of remote code execution through whatever protocol or against a router or a mobile phone. But there's this kind of combination of, let's say, 0 day that pawns Chrome and gets code on your Windows machine, but at the same time without quantum inserts and without man on the side or man in the middle. It's an unusual combination. And if you ask me, the last time I saw this happening against Russia was PuzzleMaker.
I see.
And that one was, I think, important enough because of the nature of the targets. I can tell you that the targets of PuzzleMaker, they were not just random people. They were like very important people. And I think that some of them unfortunately had some unpleasant encounters after the PuzzleMaker episode, such as accidentally falling from Windows or
Oh, really?
falling into an open
Problems with height.
sinkhole or So that's why I think that one was pretty high profile and interesting. And this one feels a bit similar to that, but I have no technical links at the moment to attribute the current 0 day chain.
I am all for this in the sense of like, if it's PuzzleMaker, interesting, because I want to understand more about PuzzleMaker because they are a really interesting threat actor. If it's not PuzzleMaker, even more interesting because I think in many ways there's been kind of like this absence of certain very important countries that neighbor Russia, who some of them are clearly very smart and must be very sophisticated and have resources, but we've never talked about, right? Like, why have we never talked about the Finns, the Swedes, the Poles, like Latvians, Lithuanians, right? Like, there's a lot of people with a lot of talent in that area that clearly have a vested interest in paying close attention to Russia that we have never actually said, oh, here's their cyber arms, here's their ops, here's how they do X, Y, and Z. So to me, this is interesting in the sense of like, I don't think they're just waking up. I'm sure they've been playing for a while. So are we getting more of a glimpse of kind of how the rest of NATO, how the more near neighbors to Russia are approaching their ops?
It's really interesting. It's really interesting, and it was kind of like, did you guys feel like it was a letdown when after reading the report to get to the end and be like,
because this isn't the report. It was
this
a
is just
letdown
the
because
OD.
it's not
This
the
is
report.
just we found an OD, right?
Yeah, but I'll try to maintain my excitement. I'm kind of hoping this is because like there was a real reason, and it's not some like kind of dumb PR strategy where it's like, oh, if we drip it out, it's like, yeah. I mean, look. There's a lot. This isn't the threat intel of like 8 years ago. There's a lot of shit happening. Either you give us something that's worth our time, or like fuck off, right? Like not to be rude. It's just like there's so much. No, I'm just saying there's so much going on. Like don't tease it when you have people's attention. You need to reward it. That's what you do with a captive audience. Otherwise, they won't come back, right?
Right. One of the justifications for it was to give people enough time to patch their Chrome instances as well, which is a fair thing. I think it seemed to me that it got lost in some timing around disclosure, because usually you get it in the mornings. This one came very late in the afternoon. They were probably waiting for Chrome to ship a page, that kind of thing. But the absence of the technical report with like some of the malware and stuff, that's, I guess we'll have to wait for that.
Right.
Let's pivot from Russia to China quickly. Again, kind of becoming a theme. We've been constantly saying, why aren't we getting APT reports out of China? We got another one actually shared by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs on X and Twitter. The Chinese embassy has been sharing this. Is a kind of a one big long report out of a Chinese group called the Cybersecurity Industry Alliance. It's a report on U.S. intelligence agencies mission and focus on targeting mobile networks. I read the report. I ran it through all kinds of AI tools, read the report, and I don't see anything particularly new. It seems to be just like a big project to recap all available public information, from leaks to, reporting out of Europe, reporting out of here, a lot of references to things that are kind of hodgepodge together. Costin, you read the report as well. Is there anything new, anything fascinating here? Is this filling our void of getting news out of China and what they're seeing?
Well, first of all, I was wondering, who is this China Cybersecurity Industry Alliance, CCIA? Which seems to be actually an influential group officially affiliated with the Chinese government.
Correct.
And they're like primarily focused on cybersecurity research, policy advocacy, industry standardization, promotion of cybersecurity practices.
Like a government-linked lobbying group. Like, what would be the equivalent here?
Would be the equivalent? Is it
like CTIA or one of those technical information alliance?
Cyber Threats Industry Alliance, one of these. It's probably something like that, I guess. And what is probably important here is that they don't seem to be having like technical goals, but it's more like a policy standardization advocacy organization. So from that point of view, and I was extremely disappointed that their report is clearly not for technical people. Reading the report, I was like scouting, are there any new IOCs, maybe some kind of domains? And by the way, that's the right way to say IOCs, which is IOCs. As correctly pointed out by people on X. Thank you for that.
Hey, you do you, okay? You keep your flair.
There's no IOCs in this thingy. And I think that the vast majority of it is written on top of Snowden leaks, if you want, like the vast majority.
Are they findings like, sorry, and I'm genuinely asking because I read the summaries, but I couldn't go through the whole report. Is it like what we used to do where you get some clever overlaps and you go, hey, we can infer that this is from the Snowden leaks? Or is it like, here's some Snowden leaks and an unusual amount of certainty and detail about how this is related to that thing? Because that would be more interesting to me. I would actually go through that. If this is just like a neat little like, master's thesis summary of the stuff that's been published, like, thanks for playing, goodbye, right?
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. Like, we would dismiss it as that and miss something important.
Right.
I went through the whole report and, well, first of all, there's, like I said, a lot of speculation and conclusions. Some of those conclusions are actually wrong. So they make the wrong extrapolation from available public data. I think that's the worst. For instance, this 2019 report by Adaptive Mobile Security about SIMjacker, in their mind, it's somehow associated with NSA tools. In reality, it's not. I know that it's unrelated to that. So to me, it seems that they were just trying to put everything into one big kind of overview of what the evil US is doing. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's based on some wrong conclusions, almost entirely on Snowden leaks and a bit of Kaspersky reports, I think, such as triangulation. And in the end, if you ask me, as I was going through the document, in the beginning, excitement was high. And as you go through the document, you slowly get disappointed. And then you see there's like 25% left. And you're like becoming a bit sad. And by the end, you realize that there's nothing in there. And you look at the clock and, oh my God, it's been 25 minutes reading through this thing. And there's nothing new in there, unfortunately. The only new things are actually mistakes, misattributions. Yeah. And I guess it only has a value from their point of view.
There's a PR value to them sharing it, though, right? Keep that in mind. Yes.
Grouping all these things, because I mean, that's real, that few people can remember all these things together. So if you ask them, to testify or make a statement about the vast, I don't know, dragnet of the evil US empire against China, they won't be able to remember all these different cases.
Man, for $200 a month, I can get somebody to remember those different cases 10 times a day.
You can do it with 20.
Yeah, well now,
Mhm.
right now you can.
Mhm.
I'm just like, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but there's a difference between like a book summary or basically a literature review, which is what that would be, and threat intel research. And that's to say, like, I hate it when even like American companies do this, right? Like you would get this a lot from like Recorded Future, or like these random think tanks. Think tanks, like think tanks used to do this shit all the time, where they'd be like, "This is a summary of all the whatever threats to critical infrastructure," and you're well, sorry, they would call it research into critical infrastructure landscape, and then you go look at it, it's like, oh, 4 blogs from Dragos, a thing from ESET, a thing from Dragos that's actually from ESET, a Wired article, right? Like, and you're like, this isn't research, right? Like, you just kind of did a shitty literature review. And like now, I'm glad that now we can automate these things for free, for relatively cheap, because hopefully that dissuades people from pretending that that stuff is research.
An interesting thing is that they're actually writing these things. We didn't see them at all. Now we're starting to see them almost on a weekly basis. We talked about the Taiwan thing with
publishing these things.
That's what I'm saying.
They're publishing and they're publishing them in English.
In English,
correct.
Yeah.
So there's clearly an objective and a mission there when the Chinese embassy is sharing it on X, and so it's like, it's almost like, hey, we need more of these things, and all these trade groups are coming up with their version of this kind of book report, and then it becomes a report, and you can name the NSA and the CIA there, and you get your publicity and so on. It just feels weekly to me when we spend time on this podcast saying they never publish, or maybe they're only sharing among themselves. We're starting to see what's coming out. We don't trust that this is the real sharing though, right? Because the quality of it, you guys are saying, is not.
Well, you hope it's not for their sake, right?
Right. And to pretend would be naive. To pretend that this is their level of visibility is being naive. Like they're much smarter and much more capable of producing better things.
Yeah.
No?
We think so.
Yeah.
We think so. Yeah.
I mean, look, they have the technical talent somewhere in the country. Like they definitely do on the reversing side. They definitely do on the exploit dev side. Do they have it organized and prioritized in order to maximize the value of the threat intel side of the house? Maybe not, but I would suspect that they do. You have the talent, you have the requirement, you have the need. My assumption has been, with no know-how whatsoever about their, intelligence community or anything about how they do things, my assumption has always been that to them, they treat threat intel as real intelligence, and they're not just squandering it for the purposes of blogs and marketing. They are taking it into the house, or they're building it inside the house and leveraging it as part of their whole strategic assessment about intelligence proper, instead of treating this as like a lesser form of intelligence that is of such lesser value than what you're building inside of the intelligence community, that you're okay with just dumping it out on the street, which is what we do. There is something to be said philosophically about what that implies, because the notion that they just can't do it, like, to me seems like, it almost seems racist. Like, they have more reversers than we do. They have more exploit folks than we do. They have a whole ecosystem of hackers and stuff. Like, why wouldn't they be able to produce threat intelligence folks? Like, that makes no sense, right?
Reminds me of a story from maybe 20 years ago. We founded the first photography club in Bucharest, and we were like about 20 people. And one of us went to visit China, and actually got the opportunity to visit the Chinese photography club, which had about 1.2 million members in the sense of the size of these groups. And like you're saying, the capabilities there and the numbers are there. I would say that probably this report has mostly kind of diplomatic value. They are planning to use it to maybe shape international cybersecurity narratives, to justify their domestic policies, kind of, just show the world that they are doing something in regards to this geopolitical competition with the US, which previously they were not. So I think, yeah, it's part of this trend that we noticed during especially last months with publications, APTC 01, these kind of things.
I'm also fascinated by the idea that we are also missing a bunch that is probably being published in Chinese language in places where we're not looking. Like these things pop up on our radar because someone either shares them, or we see them on X, or we see them somewhere where we're in this world, and when it pops up, it pops up. We're not actively looking for them, so there may be a lot of private sharing happening, not public sharing happening, that we're still not aware of. And if this is a trend if this is a deliberate strategy and trend, it's quite clear that there's a lot more there.
I think it's definitely a deliberate strategy and trend. I just don't, and there's no way that this is how they share. Like, why would they share with each other in English, right? Like, that just doesn't make any sense, right? You're going out of your way to make this intelligible to a different audience, right? So the idea that there's no way that this isn't a strategy. I think the question is a strategy towards what? And with what intended goals? Because there's a really naive version of things where this is a strategy to give the Chinese some footing on a European setting to say they do it too. So like, why are you judging us? And that shit's never gonna work. Like, that's stupid, because the problem, like, going to the Europeans and saying the Americans also spy is telling them water is wet. The problem is not that Americans spy through the internet. The problem is that when the Chinese spy through the internet, they leverage it for financial benefit in the private sector and fuck over a bunch of Western endeavors. And that distinction has never really sunk in properly with Chinese diplomats and the Chinese government. So if that's what they're trying to substantiate, that's a dumb strategy that's not really worth anyone's time. And like, okay, I'll let you make a mistake for as long as you want. However, if we don't assume utter incompetence, what is the strategy, right? Like, what are you pushing towards? Is this about like building the road towards normalizing it for everybody else to burn American ops, right? Because that would be interesting if all of a sudden the Chinese were like, hey, it's normal to burn Western stuff. And like, you start to convince, hey, when the Russians do it, there's nothing nefarious. They're doing the same thing the Americans are, same thing the Chinese are, right? Like, are you trying to make it so we have this kind of healthy global ecosystem of threat intelligence sharing where it's like, hey, you're going to burn our shit, we're going to burn your shit. What's the problem, right? Like, is it that? Or are you building a case towards something, right? Is this the nascent beginnings of a strategy towards actually burning, like having mechanisms by which to burn US operations at times when they're actually sensitive, right? Like right now, maybe the Chinese do not have good vehicles by which to burn something like, I don't know, early warning notification of somebody planning a strategic bombing run in a Middle Eastern country somewhere over a, common communication messaging app, right? Like, how would you operationalize that information in a few hours window when you see it pop up across a bunch of phones that you're probably spying on? Is this the Lab Dookhtegan 4-year buildup before you actually start like dropping crazy shit? Or is this just kind of like a dumb way of saying, oh, they do it too, right?
Look at this guy. Look at this guy teasing the next story. Lab Dookhtegan.
I'm getting good at working on the podcasting.
Lab Dookhtegan returns and returned with fireworks. We just saw the re-emergence of this. It's a Telegram channel, right, Costin? Backfill us on who it was and why it's fascinating and interesting, why we've been following this.
This is a very, very fascinating operation. They pretend to be some kind of Iranian hacktivist group, but I think their capabilities go way beyond that. I mean, they've been around since about maybe 2019, I would say. And they probably became famous around that time when they exposed Oil Rig, which was this Iranian APT group. So they doxed the members, doxed some of the tools. And it's quite interesting, by the way, they were not alone. Around the same time, there was another group called Green Leakers, which they kind of disappeared, and Green Leakers actually doxed Muddy Water. So it felt like they were, I don't know, sister operations, Lab Dookhtegan and Green Leakers. Now, Lab Dookhtegan, they kept active, publishing all sorts of interesting information, like the cryptocurrency wallets of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps officers, like the leadership, dumping also the private documents hacked from different Iranian institutions. And I think everything was going well until maybe about the beginning of this year, or like beginning of February or March. Their Telegram channel finally got banned, and they just created a new one. They on March 11th they just
So this week
forwarded.
they returned with a new Telegram channel.
They returned with a new Telegram channel. They started by forwarding all the old messages from their old channel to the new one. And
is there a way to validate that this is real, or someone could? Is it possible that someone could be masquerading? Just help me understand how Telegram works.
I think it looks real. I don't know why someone would want to masquerade. And the other thing is that the old channel seems dead. So I would assume that if they were actually still
they
active
said
on the old channel.
restrictions were put on the old channel, right? Like I don't know what that entails in Telegram, but they basically said, these Iranian bastards,
they cut us from
our Telegram channel.
So here's our new group. By the way, this can also be an opsec mechanism, something that we have seen with many of these groups. They just create something new, they drop information, after a while they delete it and they rebrand and started something new. Typically they're active maybe for a few months, 6, 8, 9 months, and then they just disappear. I'm just saying there's a certain feeling, if you want, to these groups, which if you've been looking into them, you kind of start seeing it. And I think that Lab Dookhtegan kind of fits into that picture. Now, in my opinion, what's really interesting is that around the same time that the Signalgate was happening and people were bombing the Houthis in the real life, Lab Dookhtegan was cyber bombing the Iranian tanker companies, and very interesting, claiming that, and by the way, this network of Iranian companies, which among various terrorist activities, are responsible for supplying munitions to the Houthis. So it sounded like, is there a link here between that group, the Houthis PC small group, and the Lab Dookhtegan attacking the national Iranian tanker company?
The Lab Dookhtegan thing was re-emergence and public reappearance on Telegram predated this Signalgate, correct?
They came back on March 18th, I think.
I see. Okay.
Well, they created the channel on March 6th. Then on 11th, they forwarded all the messages from the old channel. And on the 18th, they announced
themselves
6 years of activity, which is pretty impressive in my opinion.
And in this part of this,
totally grassroots and absolutely not in any way affiliated with a nation state.
That's my obvious next question is. This is obviously a nation state active defense mechanism, right?
Feels like, and the one nation state that has very good command of the Farsi language. All their posts
English
are
language,
in
cyber
like
operations,
native English and native Farsi.
Is this an American operation, Juanito?
That's a good question.
I don't think so.
Juanito would know.
It's not. I would not know. I'm just saying that I don't. I'm saying that, to me, Lab Dookhtegan and Green Leakers felt like an early predatory sparrow, right? Like it felt
Mhm.
like an early Kojenske Durand, Adelat Ali. I
What
always
is he
forget
talking
what
about, Costin?
What?
What?
Your
the
pronunciation is golden. Say that again.
no, it was the groups that have been making Iran's life interesting over the past couple of
Mm.
years with more direct hack and leak operations, maybe
Mhm.
melting down an Iranian steel plant from time to time, maybe shutting down all of their gas pumps if they ever get a little too mouthy, right? Putting up like a nice little just things like that where you're like, I think this just kind of feels like a different kind of op, and there is a most able runner in that region that to me has always felt like it would have a greater interest and more flexibility in doing this. But I'm not saying the Americans couldn't. I hope they can. I wonder if oftentimes when it comes to assessing American operations, it is never a question of capability of capacity. It's almost always a question of um,
Purpose.
mental flexibility and bureaucratic um, pole
Gymnastics.
vaulting. Yeah, like how much, like with America, it's never about can we do it? Could we? I mean, could we? Absolutely. We could also turn Tehran into a glass parking lot if we wanted to. Will we? Almost certainly not. And it's all and obviously like the nuke thing aside, on the cyber side, it's because we make it so complicated to do so, right? So even though this looks like something that the Americans could do, I would be very surprised if it was the Americans, just because I think we can't get out of our way fast enough to actually do something like this, much less for 6 years.
Just one observation to that. In general, I think you're right. But there's a confusing story with Lab Dookhtegan. If you remember back in the days when ESET published about Deprimon, which is what we used to call the depressed
Yeah,
Lamberts,
the
Lab
depressed
Dookhtegan
Lambert.
they got extremely upset. They got so upset with
Oh
ESET, and they
yeah,
started
and
like
Wait. Fill me in on this. I know nothing about this story.
so like the ESET published a story like, well, ESET is one of the companies which published about the Lambers multiple times, even maybe in some case not knowing. But most recently, I think it was with this story about Deprimon, which was a malware they found, I think, in a financial institution, if I remember correctly. It may very well have been even in Slovakia, possibly in Slovakia or Czech Republic, but definitely somewhere in Europe. And they wrote a post about that. And the malware they called Deprimon was what we were calling the depressed Lambert, for which all the targets were basically in Iran. And there was definitely a valid member of the Lamberts family. And
I
when
see.
ESET did that, Lab Dookhtegan got super mad. They got extremely upset.
I thought that was
Um,
interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
that sounds very performative though.
well,
Like
I don't know. It could. It also. I feel like again. I don't want to.
Juanito is misdirecting here.
No. No. I don't want to assign greater intentionality, and I am assuming 4 levels deep, and I don't fucking know. I just wouldn't expect the U.S. to get petty on ops like that. Like it's almost like the dumbest opsec fail you can make to publicly wave your indignation at a
Yeah.
different covert op getting burned from a covert op that could also get burned by virtue of that. Like that is that is not cleared on opsec. Okay, that's all I'm saying is that is not. If anything, it's smarter if you're trying to misdirect, and right, because it's just so overt. Like it just seems kind of like if during Stuxnet the Twitter account for CENTCOM started talking shit about Symantec, you'd be like, what the fuck just happened, right? Like, what? Like, why, right? That it's just kind of dumb, but I don't know.
Why do we give automatic credence to what is posted on anonymously on a Telegram channel? Like, for instance, in this last Lab Dookhtegan Read My Lips post, right? They say, as part of this operation, we targeted the communications network of 116 ships belonging to 2 major Iranian companies, blah, blah, blah. We just take that at face value that that's what they did, or are we just questioning, are we not questioning, like, the accuracy of any of this?
Was there a report, Kostin? I think somebody had actually.
There was actually, yeah. There were a couple of news reports about this.
About the ship and companies being popped?
Well, it's also, I think, important to say what they did to the ships, which was wipe some kind of navigational systems. But I don't think that really that cripples the ship. It doesn't mean that the engines, they just stop spinning. The ships, they're still navigating probably, but not using the satellite navigation systems. And maybe, yeah.
I mean, if they disrupt the GPS, right, that's different, right? Like if you blind one of those ships, you could navigate, but the old-fashioned way. But I'm sure that then again, I don't fucking know, right? Like, is there a middle level, right? There's like a couple hundred years worth of maritime development. I'm sure that it wasn't navigating by the stars and then GPS, right? Like I'm sure there's some other stuff in there, but it is kind of scary, right? Like I'm sure it's not ideal, right?
Sure. Kostin's Lab Dookthegan's previous leaks have checked out. I mean, there's a certain accuracy to them that there's a reason we pay attention to them, right?
Yeah, and I think I remember also when they were posting about ESET contracts in Iran, which was also interesting in my opinion, that they actually got access. Somehow there was a source of access that would give them the contracts and that information. And I was thinking, where else did we see some of these fake hacktivist groups getting holds of antivirus company contracts in Iran or with Iran? Correct. So some things never change.
Now you're connecting all kinds of things.
I hadn't thought about that. Wow.
Nicely done.
Well done. This is cool. I like how much original research is getting dropped on the podcast. Almost let me say this, entirely by Kostin, just kind of fucking, like, if we just direct Kostin to read a few articles, new research nuggets will just pop up. And then Ryan and I show up and we're like, so Kostin, what happened in this story? Tell us about the report. Because it's like, I mean, I can't keep up.
It's fascinating. Who is Intrusion Truth? Intrusion Truth, yeah.
Come on, now you're just prodding in a
I'm poking around it because they're all somewhat related, right? They're all somewhat related. It's like these cutouts that appear out of nowhere and just out specific things in specific areas, and each have their own kind of target. Is this a coordinated thing, or you think this is all just like hodgepodge?
I think some of it is for sure coordinated, and some of it is for sure nation state. When I look at Intrusion Truth, I've always thought of it as a cutout, but not for a government. Like, to me, there was always more of like is it
a think tank?
No. They'll never figure that shit out. But no,
a signal chat.
It's a signal chat. No. I mean more like, I don't know, like how many former gov folks are now in the private sector and they wish they could talk about things that they think are obvious because they understand how these companies and organizations operate at a human level, organizational level in China, and they see a deficiency between like the really advanced technical stuff people are coming up with on Chinese ops, but the deficient human organizational side of that discussion. Like that, I always wondered, to me it felt more like that, because the strategic value of it was not, hey, look at all the technical shit you missed. It was usually, hey, if you happen to pull this thread here, that one over there, and this one, the whole sweater unravels, and like this is what's underneath. And that, it just kind of felt more like parallel construction, because the stories never, to me, the stories didn't follow a clear deductive path. It was like, this is how you find this answer and that answer and that answer. And I go, yeah, but how did you find those answers? You know what I mean?
And that was always missing.
That, to me, that's how the intrusion truth stuff felt. I'm not against it. I don't have a problem. I think intrusion truth is cool. And I'm all for them doing more of what they've been doing. And I honestly, what I wish we would have seen was maybe more of that work being done by the private sector, saying, hey, yeah, actually, if you follow intrusion truth's methods, like, look at this. And folks have followed up, but we've done it. Some other folks have done it. And the true value of that stuff is it's now in the public record. I no longer have to put my neck out and say, I found 3 indicators in a Whois database that makes me think that maybe it's these 4 Chinese dudes in Chengdu. I can just say, well, intrusion truth claims it's those guys, and I have 3 or 4 indicators that also substantiate that it's probably those guys, right? And that's kind of what you get with this story about Fish Medley from ESET.
I
right?
soon, yeah, I was just going to pivot to this. Let me set it up.
I see where you're going now.
Speaking of guys in Chengdu, and it's fascinating how like leaks lead everyone down the path of an eventuality. And in this case, it started with the Isoon leaks, and then the Harfang Labs did their analysis and so on. And then slowly but surely, we started to see the connections being pieced together that ended up with the sanctions and the charges that we just saw not too long ago. Now, ESET follows up with a report that's saying that this Operation Fishmonger, which is some espionage operation out of China, was actually operated by Isoon, and they're making these connections and so on. So
this is super fucking cool. Chris St. Myers on my team discovered Fishmonger. I put that, I slapped that name on it.
You named this?
I think so, but yeah, I definitely came up with the name, but St. Myers discovered the APT, at least on our end, a few years back. It was cool to see the name pop up again in what is like really cool, obviously way like 10 steps ahead research from ESET, right? So all credit to ESET. Yeah. All credit to ESET. That's fucking awesome. And I went through some of the Isoon leak and I worked on some of the Fishmonger stuff, and I did not figure out that they were connected. So this is fucking great. But this is an interesting one in that they're putting it under like APT41 umbrella. They're also just kind of talking about some of these different components that different companies have put together, right? Like Soda Master from these guys. And to me, the Fishmonger, I know for a fact there was also a report, I want to say from Mandiant. I think they called it Fishmaster. It was some, but this is coming from like the PDB paths, I believe, included Fishmaster X64 is like what I remember off the top of my head. But it's, to me, this was a thing where I started to dig alongside these guys, and then I was more than happy to leave it to St. Myers and some of these other guys, because when you step back now and look at the assessment that ESET is making, like, this shit is so messy. The Chinese APT ecosystem is so fucking messy that, like, even when you have the crib sheet, even when you have this is the company and how they talk and what their GitHub environment looks like and how they do X, Y, and Z, it still looks messy as shit to me. I just feel like my brain is not wired for China APT, and like, I don't know, man. It makes me feel like a little ashamed.
Coste, what do you make of the ESET report?
I thought it was interesting. They're saying that this is one of the groups, that were operating under the Isoon or Angsoon umbrella, if you want. It's also interesting that ESET said, by the way, initially we thought that this was something else. We put it under the WinNTI umbrella, but later we realized that it wasn't. And we moved it to its separate cluster, and I guess that all that happens because of the tool sets they were using, and in particular this ShadowPad backdoor, which initially it was used maybe just by one group, but later it pretty much became omnipresent, and there's like half a dozen groups nowadays
So ShadowPad,
using it.
in that sense, Kostin, and this is again me not understanding this ecosystem, but trying to learn from some of the folks that work in it. The way I think about ShadowPad now is like in the same way as we thought about PlugX, as like what looks to be something that is being maintained by an organization and sold or sold access to multiple parts of the Chinese APT ecosystem, whether that's I don't know, just the mercenaries. It looks like it's the mercs and some of the offices from different parts. And like there was an amazing report by Yijen and Joey Chen, who, when they were at Sentinel-1, this is like I want to say maybe 3 years ago, in which they talked about ShadowPad and like what the C2 servers looked like and what some of the infrastructure looked like, that made it actually more clear that this was being maintained by some digital quartermaster of some sort, and then not just spread across different Chinese orgs, but also it meant that like some of them were using builders with different versions consistently. Some of them were using like some of the setup implied more of what was previously described about plugin, where it just kind of looked like, hey, someone's out there, which I think some researchers, like I think about Silas and the way he's talked about some of this before, like some folks are tracking specific identities of developers that have been around since like we worked on like the X4L stuff, who seem to still be related, like giving now they're like more part of this digital quartermaster ecosystem where they're selling some of those capabilities, some of the orb capabilities as well, the operational relay boxes, or like whatever you want to call these non-attrib networks that are being developed by these same folks who are just running a company in China. So like to just to kind of put a bow on it, or like at least circle back on it, that is where you see iSoon not as an outlier, but as an example of what seems to be an important part of the Chinese APT ecosystem, which is these tried and true vetted folks who probably used to run some of these ops back in the day, who now run some company that now provides part of the part of vital infrastructure that's being reused by multiple parts of the Chinese APT ecosystem. And that's my read on ShadowPad, right?
If this follows this trend where the iSoon leak led up to where we are today, do you guys expect we'll see Pangu Lab caught up in this at some point down the road, where we get some APT report that comes out that links them to things? Because we're starting to hear rumblings that they're another part of that ecosystem that you just described. Is that something that you're expecting, any one of you? Nobody wants to say anything.
I don't know if that's what we would expect. I think to me the mystery, like it's cool that you got some indications, and I would love for us to reach some level of ground truth. But there's two things here. Like the first one is what we already discussed on the podcast, where it's like, what exactly are we objecting to, right? Like we can't object to iSoon being a contractor that like does shit for their government in their country in a way that's like legal and normal for them to do. With Pangu Labs, what we're talking about is like, hey guys, like you were presenting yourselves as a defensive company and interfacing with the defense industry, like with the defensive side of cybersecurity, but maybe you're actually an offensive player. Like what the fuck?
This is the murky water we've been talking about on this pod for a while.
I agree with that, but I also want to tie this to a different discussion of ours, which is more the leak side of things. Like what actually happened in this iSoon leak? Like this is a big, this had a lot of ramifications. And from a research standpoint, I think it's a fucking boon, right? You put people like Dakota and Eugenio Benicasa and like all these amazing analysts, ESET included, and everybody else, who just poured through this thing and went, look, attribution of this, attribution of that, these different components, this is the way they do this work. They were actually like, we had a release recently where it's like Dakota's just like, oh yeah, this is connected to this way that like the Ministry of Public Security is doing this, that, and the other. Like it was a small leak that had a lot of like downstream consequences. And my question is like, I want to go back and be like, yo, cool, but also who the fuck leaked this and why? And it could be something as petty as like some contractor that didn't get paid, or some other competitor who wanted to fuck with them. And that in itself would be like a fun story. But if you were asking me, like, is this the beginning of a trend? I don't know, because I don't understand why this happened or how this happened in the first place. It's just, it was a nice gift and we made the most of it while we had it.
Right. We might get an intrusion truth report at some point down the road.
I mean, do we even need
Are
to?
you still
Right?
active?
Well, that's honestly, like, this might be one of the bigger wins of intrusion truth, in that they clearly influence this space so much that, like, they don't actually maybe really need to. Like, they could come out with a post and show us some stuff, but look, multiple companies, multiple researchers in multiple venues over like publications that have spanned many months have actually combed through this one and maximized the value of it. And corporate overlords haven't gotten in the way from the looks of it. So, like, do you need intrusion truth? Or did they foster this?
Leaks come from two things, though, right? Either an insider, disgruntled insider leaking something, or it's a hack and leak. But the other part of this is what we're not describing. When we talk about all these leaks and these pops here, it's like someone actually popped them and stole this information and then decided to leak it.
Leaks come from all kinds of places. Sometimes someone gets added to the wrong group chat.
There you
Sometimes you share access to a resource with the wrong person. Sometimes your SharePoint admin is kind of a dick, right? Like, these things happen. And I think that's the difference between like an intentional leak. And I think that's kind of where we're pigeonholing here, is like, clearly these leaks are intentional. This is someone, and and I make that distinction because that intent implies some goal. Even if the goal is just destabilizing, there is a goal. Somebody went out of their way, who had access to stuff that other people don't have access to, and decided that the best way to leverage that access that other people wish they had is to be public and to expand access to that data set. If I had that data set, or if somebody else here had that data set, they could also have said, this is a valuable data set. I'm going to go to, some Western government or some cutout for some Western government and say, hey guys, how about $100,000 for like the back end of this mercenary contractor that's hacking this, that, and the other? And you might go and sell that to 6 different countries and make a pretty penny, right? Some people make a living off of that shit. So somebody with this access decided that it was more valuable or more important or strategically more interesting to just post that shit on GitHub. So, like, that's where I'm like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Is this disgruntled insider, or is this like, is this the beginning of a Lab Dookhtegan aimed at China, which would be cool and very different than Intrusion Truth. Intrusion Truth was sourcing their stuff with like TI tools, with domain tools and different services, right? Like, that is very different. Like, when somebody, look, we've been talking about Casper Secrets, like, the amount of people who asked me if I was behind Casper Secrets is fucking hilarious. I'm like, do you guys think that I'm like inside Kaspersky's email servers? Like, you think I know where they are? Like, I'm reading their comms on their phones. Like, how the fuck do you think I'm gonna do that, right? Like, even if that were a thing I might want to do, that's where you get into that like capability, capacity, intent model. Even if you assumed for some reason that this is the best thing I could do with my time, how am I supposed to get my hands on the information to do so? Right? So
I know how.
Oh, well, let's talk after this. Because
Remote viewing.
Remote viewing.
You familiar with this Project Stargate?
Yeah.
Part of me wishes it was real.
We need to stare at goats for maybe if I stare at my cat for long enough, I can remote view into.
But like, I can't imagine that nobody thought about using remote viewing for hacking. Like, just what's in whoever's computer, or like what's their password, or
remote
things
viewing.
like that.
Remote viewing was the OG attempt at hacking, right? Like, you just what if we just, before the Ant catalog, there were psychics. There were people out there with a jewel and a turban. Sorry, for the rest of you, there was a period when both the Soviets and the Americans thought it was worthwhile to spend some time trying to like use psychics to figure out how to spy on other people. I don't think it went super well, but maybe we wait for some declassified documents to tell us that it didn't go well.
Before we run out of time, can we do a quick magic money segment with something that we skipped over last week, but I want to touch on that now that Costin is back here, is the US is scrapping sanctions on Tornado Cash, this crypto mixer that has been accused in the past of doing some big money laundering for North Koreans. At the time when they announced these sanctions, we were told that this Tornado Cash is the place for all this magic money mixing, that it starts to disappear and becomes even more magical. Why, like, what's happening here, Costin? What's this about face about? Is this some sort of legal thing that we've become more clear on? Why? What do you think is happening here?
Well, I think there's quite a big difference from the previous administration in the sense of
This
how
is a
they
crypto
handle.
friendly.
Yeah, in how they handle, let's say, the issue of cryptocurrencies in general. And to be honest, like back in the days when the original Tornado Cash sanctions happened, a lot of people were extremely worried, and that's not like necessarily people who are doing malicious stuff, terrorists, whatever, but like normal people who were like wondering how is it that maybe writing some software that just, I don't know, adds numbers together and multiplies them can get you in jail and sanctioned. How is
Tornado
that
Cash is a company?
It's not a company, no. It's what
What
can
is
you
it?
say it is? It's a software in essence. It's a software, it's a contract, it's a smart contract running on the
Maintained by
Ethereum
whom?
VM.
But created and maintained by whom?
Created by two programmers, which actually I think
Didn't
they
this the
ended
guy
up in
who
jail
went to
for
North
that.
Korea to do a speech, and then he was no, for real? Am I wrong? Isn't this the Tornado Cash creator or someone related to them went to North Korea at a conference and did a presentation and was subsequently charged
Correct.
for assisting nuclear?
Saying something along the lines of like, you guys are really stupid because if you're smart, you'd be using Tornado
To wash
Cash.
this money, right? Yeah.
And then like everyone was like,
They listen.
oh.
And look, what kind of world do we live in where we, someone can't just go to, one of the most sanctioned countries on earth and tell them how to launder their money without getting in trouble? Like, what sort of planet is this, guys?
One of the things. Wait a second. One of the things in this release too, Costin, that you got to help me understand is that the OFAC lists 100 Ethereum addresses that are also being removed from the special designated national lists, which is the record for maintaining blacklists. What does that mean? So now we're not sanctioning this Tornado Cash, which isn't quite a company, really. It's a technology. I don't understand what's happening here.
So
whose software?
That's a good question. So I think the beauty of Ethereum, which is in a way quite different from Bitcoin from the point of view that it allows you to write software that runs in the blockchain if you want. It runs, it's running in there, and anyone can interact with that software. So in a way, let's say I can, for instance, create a contract on the Ethereum blockchain which collects donations for the three-body problem. But I can also make a provision there that we cannot withdraw those donations for the next 5 years. So whatever donations come in, we will not get them for the next 5 years. And we can even do something like at the end of that 5 years, people can even do some kind of a voting based on the amount of money they donated, which they decide if we deserve it or not. So
is this a DAO?
It's essentially that powerful. Like, it allows you to build things that are that powerful. And one of the things that people built was a smart contract that it just mixes money together. Like, you put some money, you let it there, like in the soup, it mixes with all the other vegetables, and at the end you can like scoop it back. Like, what did you put in? It was a carrot. Okay, so you put back like 5 carrot pieces out of the soup. It may be yours, it may be somebody else's carrot, or it may be somebody else's carrot look-alike vegetable in the soup that you are scooping out.
What's the legitimate use case for this that is not crime?
Privacy. It is privacy. It's the same, like, I tell you, why are people using Signal and not calling each other on their phones? Because they're worried about privacy.
So
And,
so this is a privacy tool. This is a
it
tool
is
to.
a privacy tool, and it essentially
This is a
builds
stretch.
it builds a privacy layer on
It's a
top
stretch. Is a
of
nice way to put it.
super fully transparent blockchains. And there's people, by the way, people out there which are saying like, listen, magic money is a terrible idea. Like, people are saying Bitcoin, whatever, it's a terrible idea because everything is being monitored, everything is logged, every single like if you go to the grocery and you buy a carrot with cash, there's no record of you, Ryan, actually buying that carrot.
There's a
with
camera
Bitcoin.
in the store. There's a
Maybe it
camera in the
doesn't
store
work, maybe
timestamped,
it's
yeah.
broken, maybe they don't have money, maybe it's just like one of those cameras you buy off
Privacy is
Temu or
completely
Alibaba.
overrated, by the way. Like this the idea that you have privacy and that it exists and people walking on the street saying don't shoot me, like you,
Hilarious.
it's
Hilarious.
madness.
It's
the
like the
idea
people-
that cash.
It's like the people who used to put up that thing on Facebook where it's like, I don't approve the NSA collecting this, and you're like, yeah, I don't think you understand how any of this
Anything
shit
works.
works. But I love your enthusiasm. I'm
The
glad
even
you're here to
more-
play.
The even more funny people are those who are like begging the NSA for a copy of whatever document they lost in a ransomware attack. Like, hey,
Oh
can
my
I-
god.
do you guys have a copy of my?
I mean,
Yeah.
look, if I God bless them, right? Like they're really trying.
One of the things in wait, there's a bit of reporting on CoinDesk around this specific unsanctioning.
Wait, can we talk about? I'm sorry, Ryan. Like, just for the point Kostin was making, like, can we just talk about this idea that, like, because you build a thing that runs on its own, you're not responsible for the outcomes? Like, if I build a Rube Goldberg machine and it just like it's a ball that like you hit it and it goes around whatever and it just like spins 3 times, it goes out of my window and it gets into the other building and the ball drops and whatever, and at the end of it there's a gun with a trigger that's just like pointing at someone's head and the ball like hits it and the guy's head gets blown off. I go, well, my cat hit the ball, so I didn't kill this person. You're like, you build a whole fucking contraption whose entire goal is to do that. Like,
We
how are
went
you
over
not
this in the
responsible for the
1990s.
outcome?
We went over this in the
Yeah,
1990s with Napster. Napster created the tool, but they weren't stealing the music.
Interesting. But the author of DC++ went to jail in Japan, right? Or am I mistaken?
I mean, they
I don't
were
remember.
responsible for all the damage. Like, they were held responsible for all that. I don't agree with the outcome, but
But
like-
look, you're all saying that magic money is fake. It's just numbers on the internet. Like if it's all fake, like
no,
why
I'm
does it
saying
matter?
I'm saying it doesn't matter that it's. I think the magic of it, the complexity of the math, does not absolve you of the simple reality of what you've made, right? Like if I create like 400 shell companies and then like come here and do this like spinning cups game and you go, where's the money? Where's the sanctioned money? Where's the sanctioned money? What, going once, going twice, and I'm just like spinning the shit around and I go, ha, it's gone. You're like, oh, that's an amazing trick, but that's still fucking money laundering. Like what you like what it like you just like you make it like a really nice like act and everyone goes, oh, David Copperfield just made $80 million of North Korean illicit funds disappear on a stage in Madison Square Garden. You go, yeah, but that's still money laundering. Like that's a cool show.
I think this was-
back to you. Like
Sorry, Ryan. Like,
Cash is used for money laundering. Let's ban cash. Why are we not banning cash? Or actually, we are. Soon cash will be banned, right? Like there's places
it's
around
the
the
war
world where
on hobos.
people don't use cash anymore. Even I remember I was in the US maybe 15, 20 years ago, and I wanted to pay in cash like for a grocery bill, and my friends
Shady.
are like, "What are you doing? What are you?" And I'm like, "What? Saying like nobody pays in cash here, only criminals. Like we're gonna pay with the credit card, like the normal people do." And I was like, "Huh? Okay, I see what you mean."
I think there was a U.S. federal appeals court case that came down that basically said that the U.S. Treasury can't really directly sanction this tornado cash
Software.
service. Yeah. And they have their own token too, right, Kostin?
I tell you, like, why people were worried. A lot of people were worried, and the best example here is that Monero. Monero is essentially a privacy-focused cryptocurrency, which again is software, right? This is software, and they were saying like, okay, if they're banning Tornado Cash, Monero is next, and after that, I don't know, Zcash is next, and so on and so on. Pretty much all the mobile coin and whatever privacy-focused cryptocurrency out there will be banned as well, and that is generally worrying as a trend. Banning pretty much all kind of cryptocurrency privacy-oriented instruments is a worrying trend, and where do you stop? Like maybe, yeah, we're gonna ban Tornado Cash, but we're not gonna touch Monero. So yeah, that's a question. In my opinion, the fact that they sanctioned Tornado Cash was mostly related to the fact it was being abused massively. Like the amount of abuse there by Lazarus was sky high. But I don't think it really had any kind of significant effect because Lazarus, as you have seen from the recent activities, they've gotten pretty good at laundering stuff anyways without Tornado Cash and by using many other mechanisms. So I don't think that that really helped a lot. At the same time, I think that nowadays the situation is also a lot different in the sense that companies like Chainalysis, they've gotten so much better at tracking money going through this laundering system. So the illusion that somehow the money gets lost in these Tornado Cash mixers, I mean, people who really know things, they know that, yeah, they don't just get completely lost. There are traces, and sometimes it's even like a matter of time before vulnerabilities are discovered, which allow people to unmask previous transactions on the blockchain, as it happened, for instance, with Monero. And one of the things, by the way, with Monero is that they keep changing the protocol. I think every 6 months there's a new hard fork. They completely change and fix bugs in order to stay at the edge of privacy technologies. So in a way, I think it was a bit too much, that the fact that they banned. What I thought was impressive, and I thought that, like, wow, that's almost I don't think I've seen it before, but essentially their website was seized by the FBI. It had its name servers pointing to the FBI, seized by the FBI name servers, and now, like, suddenly it's available again. So I don't remember having seen this before. Something that the FBI seized, the website, is available again.
Interesting. Anything to add to Tornado Cash in this story, or we are just gonna?
I'll tell you one thing. Me personally, I wouldn't use Tornado Cash if I had like any kind of magic money to put through it.
Why not?
Because I think that already a lot of exchanges, they see it as a kind of suspicious, if you want, and that's one thing. And the other thing is that people say that this means nothing. In 4 years, it will be blacklisted again. A new administration will come, and they'll say, like, no, we're gonna blacklist it again. What more interesting, I think, alternative to Tornado Cash is something called the Railgun, that the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, also personally supported. It's a kind of a similar idea, but in a way, it says if everybody if you can prove that the money you're putting into the soup, like your carrot, if all of us, let's say we want to make this soup thingy, and I can prove this is me, Kostin, that's Juan, that's Ryan, we all put carrots, it means that whatever you take out, it will be one of our original carrot pieces. So it cannot be from Lazarus, it cannot be from anyone else. Like, this is our kind of clean soup. Okay, so it's untainted. So whatever the result comes out of it, that's not money laundering. It's just bodies.
It is
such
complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit. Like, if we like it sort of like very conveniently ignores the fact that, like, just because I took a $10 bill and you have a different $10 bill and we swap $10 bills, like, it might not be the exact bill, but that still represents a transaction. right? Like there is it's the part where you're like, it's very convenient to go like, oh yeah, in this case it's not money, in that case it is money, in this case it's kind of like cash, in this case it's like gold, in the other case it's like credit card debt, and in the other one it's just confetti, just right, like it's just
This
what the
guy's
fuck
trying
is
to
going
fight.
on, man?
This guy's trying to explain magic, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and behind your ear. Yeah.
Can we close
Look,
the show?
I'm not the one living in a country where your president is trying to solve the national debt crisis with magic money.
Ay. Can we end the show?
Our problems are much simpler. I can show you.
If it makes you yeah, it's just the bottle cap. I was gonna say, if it makes you feel better, our problems are your problems too.
Can we close the show with some shout outs, please, before you guys get to, I know Juanito is never ready. So while you think about it, I want to give a thank you to Katie Masuris for filling in with us, sitting in with us last week. It was a great episode. The listeners, amazing feedback. Thanks to Katie for popping on the show. Always invited back. We're trying to get Dave Vitale to come back on the show and tell us about OpenAI becoming a threat intel powerhouse. So one day, hopefully, we can shame him into coming back on the show.
Can we have him on the show to tell us about 0 days? And,
100%.
I want him to talk about
routers
03, 04, 05.
Lab Dookhtegan, the whole thing.
What's coming?
Like
What's
0
coming?
days and hacking and hacking
Dave Vitale,
back.
if you're listening.
Juanito, close the show. You got some shout outs?
So obviously, shout out to the Signal devs. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're listening. I hope you make it a little more sensible for us. Clearly important shit is happening. We used to run drone strikes on IRC. Now, we do big airstrikes on Signal. So keep doing what you guys are doing and maybe make it a little more sensible. And then next week, Black Hat Asia, man. I think Ryan kind of bailed out on the reunion. Last time we all hung out together was in Singapore, so whatever.
That's why I know it's too far. No chance.
But I'm pretty excited to go. I'm gonna go. I'm speaking on some like panel on like reversing for like new folks to join. And
same for me.
Oh, so we're speaking on the same panel. We're on the panel together. Panel? Look at that.
Reversing.
So we're gonna be hanging out in Singapore, man. I don't know.
Austin, are we gonna talk about your very prominently placed logo on that shirt? Like, what does that logo say, and what is it?
Give us.
This, I don't know,
swag.
man. I got it off Temu. I like the logo.
You got some shout outs?
I like the stock.
Austin, you got some closing shout outs?
Any listeners of the show that'll be at Black Hat, please come and say hello. We'll be there for at least me. I'll be there on Thursday and Friday, landing I think on Wednesday afternoon. So please drop us a message if you wanna just say hello. I was thinking it would be interesting to hear if you're around. So come and say hi.
Take some pictures for our 3-Buddy Problem Friends and Family PC small group chat.
Small group.
On my side, our friends at PivotCon announced their first keynote is Jackie Burns-Coven, head of cyber threat intelligence at Chainalysis. So there's going to be some magic money happening.
Jackie's a badass. That's going to be an amazing keynote. She's awesome.
So congrats to the PivotCon folks for snagging their keynote and announcing it early. That's happening right after RSA, I believe, in Malaga, Spain. That's kind of a sister conference of ours, and our friends run that. So we're going to give them a shout out as well.
Yeah.
On that note, let's close the show. Thank you guys for hanging out. It is 10:35 a.m. here on the West Coast, and it's a good time to say peace out, guys.
Fist, America flag, fire emoji.
Fist, America flag, fire emoji.
Arrivederci.